Okay. Can you go into that a little bit?
Can we go into that?
Yeah.
It's a very abstract concept, right? So when we talk about, if I say dark money to the average person, they know that dark money has something to do with, it feels like it's corruption, right? When you talk about campaign finance reform, people's eyes glaze over because nobody, the word finance, when you're having a conversation with other people, it puts them to sleep, right? Because nobody likes talking about finances. That always makes them think of bills that they have to pay and things that they really don't want to deal with. So it shuts people down.
Okay.
These two phrases are in desperate need of an overhaul in terms of marketing. And one of the things was when we would start talking about campaign finance, it didn't really hit home. And I think, people would hear that when we go, well, dark money. They go, and then they kind of glaze over and wait for the next thing to come along. And I think when it comes to the things that are impacting our democracy and impacting negatively our ability to be represented truly, that's big, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you think the conversation? Let me rephrase that.
Okay.
What phrase do you think should be used, or what direction do you think the conversation should be going in?
Well, it's tough, right? So we have a little meme out right now that we put out last week and everything. And the thing was, corporate PAC money is really just a bribe, right? Now the problem is, everybody knows what bribery is, right? But we can't say, your current representatives are taking bribes because you can actually get sued for that, right? And there's technically law that makes everything that they're doing seem above board. Now, the operative word is seem above board, right? And technically, which is how everything gets bastardized and, how our representation gets thrown asunder. So we can't say bribe, right? Now, when you talk about this kind of stuff, like all the phrases that we're used to seem so archaic. Like you can't go, well, there's these fat cats in Washington and blah, blah, blah. That makes no sense, right? Or, fat cats. Anyway, you can't talk about payola. That means nothing anymore. So, I don't know what the phrase is, but one of the things is we have to start talking about what the practical impact is.
Yeah. So what is the practical impact?
The practical impact is, and I was trying to make that transition just now. No, don't apologize, because I took a pause because, in order to get to there, you have to tell a story, right? And I think people have to start drawing connections to their stories. For me, I've told this story over and over again. One of the things that was big in terms of me getting into politics was the environment and tying that back together with, healthcare and tying that back into policy, right? My son got sick. My son almost died. And we live in Denton. And in Denton, you guys have heard this story over and over again. In Denton, we passed the fracking bill, the anti-fracking bill, back in 2014, right? So how does this tie back to dark money? Well, it ties back in this way. When the anti-fracking movement started to gain some real traction, if you go back and look at campaign finance forms back then for our state representative, Crownover, right when things started to look like this thing was actually going to pass, this person was actually running to be reelected for State House of Representatives. And in about the month, a little bit over a month, right before the election, suddenly she starts getting this influx of donations. And this influx of donation is coming from big oil and, and gas PACs, and sometimes directly from these companies, and it comes into the tune of somewhere close to $30,000. And that's just the stuff that we can trace back, right?
Yeah.
That's not the stuff that we, that's hidden through something else or some PAC that seems kind of, obscure. So when she got elected, what she then went to do in Austin was to go and support this bill, HB 40, which took away our ability to enact a fracking ban. It took away local control. And it was specifically passed to, undermine Denton's ability to protect ourselves, right? And that's the problem. Okay, so when we talk about dark money and campaign finance reform, what we're talking about is people actually buying influence and using that influence to get to these representatives who are supposed to represent us, but making those representatives vote against our interests. And that's the thing that's bad, and that's the thing that I get passionate about. So, you know, when I say we can't use the phrase bribery, when I tell you that story, it sounds an awful lot like that word, which we're not going to tie specifically because we don't want to get sued, even though it ties very closely to the definition. We're not saying that's what it is. But the thing is, you know, when you look at that, or when you look at our current representative who takes millions of dollars from, you know, big pharma and healthcare and insurance, and then tells us that our healthcare is fine, we know that that's not true. And we know that a lot of that influence is based on the fact that this person's getting millions of dollars from people who aren't their representatives, right? So, I don't know what the phrase should be, but here's what I would say it feels like, okay? If people are listening to a campaign promise, and that campaign promise is to represent us and our interests, and in exchange for believing and supporting that campaign promise, you know, we have an item of consideration, which is a vote. We cast this vote in exchange for that. If what they're doing, once they get there, is not represent what we've actually paid for via our vote, they're actually representing somebody else who gave them cash, well, they made a promise to us and they broke that promise. In a way, what they've actually done is defraud the voter on a promise that they made to us, right? We paid for their representation with our vote based on promises they made, and if they back down on that, if they break that promise, if they never had any intention to follow through with it, that's defrauding a voter. So you know what I would love to have applied to this, the true phrase I would like to have, you know, applied to dark money or campaign finance reform is voter fraud, because voters are being defrauded. We can't have that, because voter fraud already means something else. It means this kind of abstract thing where we believe that somebody of color is going to vote twice, and that's undermining our democracy. It's not. So, I went on a rant. But you know what? When people ask what I'm passionate about and why I'm passionate about dark money and campaign finance reform, this is why. And I think everybody needs to really stop and think about, you know, what they've been getting from their representatives in exchange for what they've been promised, and how that's been undermined by this system. And for me, it feels like defrauding voters. We'll come up with a different phrase for it at some point. We'll put our little marketing brains behind it, and we'll try and get everybody else to kind of adopt that phrase. But in the meantime, if people want to reframe voter fraud as the effects of them being screwed over by dark money, I would have no problem with that.
All right.
I love this song. Anyway.